My coworker asked me to cover their shift. HR called me the next morning. The thing about betrayal is that you never see it coming from the person bringing you coffee. When Robert Callahan from HR asked me to come to his office at 8:30 on a Thursday morning, I thought maybe I was finally getting that promotion. I'd been with Meridian Financial Services for 3 years, always the first one in, last one out. The kind of employee who said yes when Diana Whitmore texted me Wednesday afternoon asking if I could cover her evening shift. She had a family emergency, she said. Her mom had fallen. Of course I'd help. That's what decent people do. I walked into Robert's office expecting a handshake and walked out 2 hours later with a lawyer's business card and a sick feeling that my entire life was about to implode. "We have surveillance footage of you accessing the client database at 9:15 last night," Robert said, sliding a manila folder across his desk. "Care to explain why you transferred $83,000 from the Dawson account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands?" I'd been working client services at Meridian for exactly 3 years and 4 months when Diana joined our team. She was mid-30s, divorced, always had photos of her 2 kids on her desk. The kind of person who remembered your birthday and brought in homemade cookies during the holidays. We weren't close friends, but we were friendly. The job itself was straightforward enough. We managed investment portfolios for high-net-worth clients, which mostly meant answering panicked calls when the market dipped and processing transfer requests that had been approved by our supervisors. The security protocols were intense. Every transaction required dual authentication, supervisor approval, and a digital paper trail that corporate reviewed weekly. It wasn't the kind of place where money just disappeared. Diana had her own client list, I had mine, and we occasionally helped each other out when someone needed to leave early or take a long lunch. She'd covered for me twice when I had dental appointments. When she texted me about her mother, I didn't think twice about saying yes. I figured I'd answer her calls, take messages, handle any urgent requests. Standard stuff. I logged into her workstation using the temporary access credentials our IT department issued for shift coverage. Everything was by the book. That Wednesday evening shift was quiet. I sat at Diana's desk in the half-empty office, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and handled exactly 3 phone calls. 2 were clients checking their account balances. The third was someone asking about our hours. I logged each interaction in the call system like we were supposed to. Around 9, I processed a few pending transfer requests that were already in Diana's queue, all of them pre-approved by our supervisor David Singh earlier that day. I remember checking the approval timestamps because I'm paranoid about getting blamed for mistakes. Everything had David's digital signature and the green approval stamp. I clicked through the security prompts, entered Diana's temporary credentials when the system asked, and confirmed the transfers. The largest one was $83,000 from the Dawson account to what the transfer request listed as Dawson Secondary Holdings, LLC. I even double-checked the routing information against the approved documentation attached to the request. It matched perfectly. I finished up around 9:45, logged out of Diana's workstation, and went home feeling good about helping out a coworker in need. I microwaved leftover pasta, watched half an episode of some crime show on Netflix, and fell asleep before 11. My phone didn't ring. No emergency alerts. Nothing. The HR office at Meridian was designed to feel friendly and approachable, all soft gray walls and motivational posters about teamwork. Robert Callahan had been with the company for 15 years, a balding man in his 50s who wore sweater vests and always seemed slightly apologetic about everything. He wasn't apologetic that Thursday morning. Sitting across from him was Janet Morrison from Legal. Wait, I can't use Morrison. Let me reconsider. Sitting across from him was Janet Brennan from Legal, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who took notes on everything I said. "The transfer you processed last night," Robert continued, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "was flagged by our fraud detection system at 6 this morning. The receiving account in the Cayman Islands doesn't belong to Mr. Dawson. It doesn't belong to any entity we have on file. The approval you claim to have seen, our system shows it was created at 9:03 last night, 16 minutes after you logged into Diana's workstation." I felt my stomach drop through the floor. "That's impossible," I said. "The approval was already there. It had David's signature. The timestamp said 4:30 in the afternoon." Janet looked up from her notes. "Our IT department pulled the metadata. The approval document was created using Diana's credentials at 9:03, modified at 9:12, the transfer executed at 9:15, all while you were logged into her station. I'm not someone who panics easily. I've sat through market crashes and client meltdowns without breaking a sweat. But sitting in that office, watching Robert and Janet exchange looks that screamed guilty, I felt my hands start to shake. "Where's Diana?" I asked. "Did you talk to her? This is her workstation, her credentials, her client. I was just covering her shift." Robert's expression didn't change. "Diana called in sick this morning. We've been trying to reach her, but she's not answering. Her phone goes straight to voicemail." He slid another paper across the desk. "This is a statement from David Singh. He says he never approved any transfer from the Dawson account yesterday. He left the office at 3 and didn't access the system again until this morning." The room felt like it was tilting. "That's not possible. I saw his signature. I wouldn't have processed anything without approval. That's literally my job." Janet clicked her pen. "Will, I need you to understand the severity of this situation. $83,000 is missing. The client is threatening legal action. We have surveillance footage of you at Diana's desk at the exact time the fraudulent documents were created and the transfer was executed. Unless you can provide evidence to the contrary, we have no choice but to suspend you pending a criminal investigation. The word criminal hit me like cold water. You're saying I stole money? My voice came out louder than I intended. I've worked here for 3 years. I've never had a single complaint. Why would I suddenly decide to steal from a client using someone else's workstation with cameras everywhere? Robert held up his hands. We're not accusing you of anything yet. We're gathering facts. But you need to understand that this looks very bad. The FBI handles financial fraud cases. They'll want to talk to you. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. You're suspended without pay effective immediately. Turn in your badge and any company property. We'll be in touch once we know more. I walked out of that office in a daze, my badge and security fob left on Robert's desk. People were starting to arrive for the morning shift. I could feel their eyes on me as I grabbed my jacket from my desk and headed for the exit. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my buddy Alex, who worked in accounting. Dude, what happened? HR just sent an email about unauthorized access to client accounts. News was already spreading. By lunch, everyone would know. By tomorrow, I'd probably be arrested. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make my hands steady enough to drive. The morning sun felt too bright, too normal for a day when my entire life was collapsing. I kept replaying the previous night in my head. Diana's text about her mom, logging into her workstation. The transfer requests already queued up, already approved. I could see David's signature as clearly as if it was still on the screen in front of me. But if IT said those documents were created at 9:03 and I logged in at 8:59, then someone had created fake approvals while I was sitting right there. Someone who knew exactly when I'd be at that desk. Someone who had access to create documents that looked legitimate enough to fool me. Diana. It had to be Diana. But why? What possible reason would she have to frame me for fraud? We barely knew each other outside of work. I'd helped her, covered her shifts, brought her aspirin when she had a headache. The sick feeling in my stomach got worse. I'd been set up. Carefully, deliberately set up. And I had maybe 24 hours before the FBI showed up at my door. The law offices of Reeves and Partners occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the downtown district, all exposed brick and modern glass. Catherine Reeves met me in a conference room that smelled like coffee and leather. She was in her mid-40s, formerly a federal prosecutor according to her website, now specializing in white-collar criminal defense. I'd found her through a frantic Google search and burned through my emergency fund paying her retainer. Start from the beginning, Catherine said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. Don't leave anything out. Every detail matters. I walked her through everything. Diana's text, the shift coverage, the pre-approved transfers sitting in her queue, the Dawson account, the approval document with David's signature. Catherine took notes without interrupting, her expression neutral. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the pad. The metadata is a problem, she said. If IT says those documents were created at 9:03 while you were logged in, that's hard evidence. But metadata can be manipulated if someone knows what they're doing. We need to prove Diana had the access and the motive to create fake approvals and pin this on you. She asked me to cover her shift, I said. She knew exactly when I'd be at her desk. Catherine nodded. Opportunity. But that's not enough. We need to establish a pattern. Has Diana had financial problems? Debts? Legal issues? We need to dig into her background and find a motive. She pulled out her phone and started typing. I'm going to hire a private investigator, someone who specializes in financial fraud. We'll also need to request all of Diana's communications with you, her access logs, her personal financial records if we can get them. The company will fight us on some of this, but once the FBI gets involved, discovery becomes easier. The word FBI made my chest tight. How long do I have before they arrest me? Catherine's expression didn't change. Honestly? Could be days, could be weeks. Financial fraud investigations take time. They'll want to build a solid case before they make a move, but you need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Don't talk to anyone from Meridian without me present. Don't post anything on social media. Don't try to contact Diana. If the FBI wants to interview you, you invoke your right to an attorney immediately. Understand? I nodded, feeling like I was living in someone else's nightmare. I spent the next 3 days in my apartment, jumping every time a car door slammed outside. Catherine's investigator, a former forensic accountant named Michael Torres, worked fast. By Monday morning, he'd compiled a preliminary report that Catherine forwarded to me with a subject line that just said, "Read this." Michael had pulled Diana's financial records through methods I probably didn't want to know about. Turned out Diana Whitmore was drowning in debt. She'd maxed out 6 credit cards, owed $38,000 in medical bills from her youngest kid's surgery, and was 3 months behind on her mortgage. Her ex-husband had stopped paying child support 8 months ago and was dodging court orders. The family emergency she'd mentioned? Her mom was fine, living in Arizona, active on Facebook, posting photos of her garden. There was no fall, no hospital visit, no crisis. It was all a lie to get me to cover that shift. Michael's report also showed something else. Diana had been accessing client accounts she wasn't authorized to touch. Small things, spread out over months. Looking at balances, reviewing transaction histories, downloading files. The Dawson account was one of 6 high-value portfolios she'd been monitoring. The report included screenshots of access logs that Meridian's IT department either hadn't noticed or hadn't flagged yet. Catherine called me at 2 in the afternoon. "The FBI wants to interview you tomorrow. Special Agent Lisa Kovac from the Financial Crimes Unit. I'll be there with you. Don't panic. This is expected." I'd never been in an FBI office before. The building was concrete and glass, security tighter than an airport. Special Agent Lisa Kovac was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that didn't miss anything. She led Catherine and me into a windowless interview room and got straight to business. "Mr. Garrett," she said, opening a file folder, "I'm investigating the theft of $83,000 from Meridian Financial Services. Your employer has provided us with surveillance footage, access logs, and metadata showing that you were the last person to access the compromised account. I'd like to hear your version of events." I glanced at Catherine, who nodded. I told Agent Kovac everything, the same story I'd told Catherine in HR Diana's text, the shift coverage, the pre-approved transfers. Agent Kovac listened without expression, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, she slid a printed screenshot across the table. "This is the approval document you claim to have seen. According to our forensic analysis, it was created using administrator credentials at 9:03 p.m. on the night in question. Can you explain how you saw a document that didn't exist until after you logged in?" "I can't," I said, "but I know what I saw. That approval had a timestamp of 4:30. It had David Singh's digital signature. It looked completely legitimate." Agent Kovac pulled out another document. "We interviewed Mr. Singh. He states categorically that he never approved any transfers that day. He left the office at 3 p.m. We verified his alibi. He was at a parent-teacher conference at his daughter's school from 4 until 6. 32 witnesses." Catherine leaned forward. "Agent Kovac, my client is not the only person who had access to create those documents. Diana Whitmore has been monitoring high-value client accounts without authorization for months. She has significant financial problems that give her motive. She specifically requested that my client cover her shift, creating the perfect opportunity to frame him. We have documentation of all of this." I saw something flicker in Agent Kovac's expression. Interest, maybe. She opened another folder. "We've been looking into Ms. Whitmore. She's proven difficult to locate. She hasn't returned to work, isn't answering her phone, and according to her neighbors, packed a suitcase and left her house Friday night. Her vehicle was found abandoned at the airport Sunday morning. We've flagged her passport, but if she used a fake ID, she could be anywhere." The room went cold. "She ran," I said. "She framed me and ran." Agent Kovac closed her folders. "Mr. Garrett, I'm not going to lie to you. The evidence against you is substantial. However, the evidence against Ms. Whitmore is also compelling. We're treating this as an ongoing investigation with multiple persons of interest. I need you to stay available, don't leave the state, and continue cooperating with our inquiries." She stood up. "We'll be in touch." Catherine and I walked out of the building into the afternoon sun. "That went better than I expected," she said. "Kovac is good. She's not tunnel-visioned on you. She sees the holes in this case. But Diana running makes this complicated. If we can't find her, it becomes a he-said-she-said situation with you as the last person touching that account." I felt exhaustion settling into my bones. "So what do we do?" Catherine's expression hardened. "We prove Diana did this, and we find the money, because $83,000 doesn't just vanish. It went somewhere, and that somewhere will lead us straight to her." Michael Torres earned every penny of his fee over the next 2 weeks. He traced the $83,000 through 3 shell companies and 2 international banks before hitting a wall in the Cayman Islands, where banking privacy laws made getting information nearly impossible without a court order. But he found something else. Diana had made a mistake. She'd used her personal laptop to access the offshore account on Wednesday night, just hours before asking me to cover her shift. Her home internet IP address was all over the access logs. Michael also discovered that Diana had been communicating with someone named Julian Cross, a former IT contractor who'd worked at Meridian 2 years ago and been fired for unauthorized system access. Julian had the technical skills to create fake approval documents, manipulate metadata, and make everything look legitimate. He'd also recently deposited $15,000 into his checking account. His PayPal showed a transaction from an account registered to DW Consulting. Catherine filed a motion to compel Meridian to preserve all of Diana's communications and system logs. She also filed a formal complaint with the FBI naming Diana and Julian as co-conspirators. Agent Kovac responded faster than I expected. She brought Julian in for questioning on a Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks after this nightmare started. Julian Cross cracked in under 2 hours. Catherine got a call from Agent Kovac that afternoon. "Your client is clear," she said. "Mr. Cross confessed to creating the fraudulent approval documents. He received $20,000 from Diana Whitmore to help her frame someone at Meridian for the theft. She specifically told him when you'd be covering her shift and exactly what needed to be in place to make you look guilty. He logged into Meridian's system remotely, using Diana's administrator credentials, created the fake approvals with backdated timestamps that would appear legitimate to you, then altered the metadata after the transfer went through to make it look like the documents were created while you were logged in. The technical details are complex, but essentially, he made you the perfect patsy. I could barely process what I was hearing. So, I'm not being charged? Agent Kovach's voice softened slightly. Correct. We're issuing a warrant for Ms. Whitmore's arrest on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Mr. Cross is cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. You're free to go back to your life, Mr. Garrett. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. But going back to my life wasn't that simple. Meridian had suspended me without pay for 3 weeks. My savings were decimated from legal fees. And everyone in my professional network had heard I was under investigation for fraud. Catherine helped me craft a statement for Meridian's HR department. Robert Callahan called me into his office the following Monday morning. He looked uncomfortable, which was the closest he'd probably come to admitting they'd screwed up. We've been briefed by the FBI, he said. Obviously, we owe you an apology. We acted on the evidence we had at the time, but we should have investigated more thoroughly before suspending you. Janet Brennan sat next to him, her expression unreadable. We'd like to offer you your position back, with full back pay for the time you were suspended, plus an additional 2 weeks of paid leave to compensate for the stress this caused. I looked at both of them. 3 weeks ago, they'd treated me like a criminal. They'd suspended me without hesitation, shared information with my coworkers that destroyed my reputation, and never once questioned whether I was being framed. I want a formal letter of apology, I said. I want it on company letterhead, signed by the CEO, acknowledging that I was wrongfully accused and that the investigation cleared me completely. I want that letter sent to every employee who received the email about unauthorized account access, and I want a 20% raise. Robert's eyes widened. Janet started to object, but I cut her off. You damaged my reputation. You let everyone think I was a thief. I had coworkers crossing the street to avoid me. So yes, I want compensation. Or I can take this to an employment lawyer, and we can discuss wrongful termination. They gave me everything I asked for. The CEO's letter went out company-wide on Wednesday afternoon. My raise was processed that same day. I took the 2 weeks of paid leave and spent most of it sleeping and trying to remember what normal felt like. Agent Kovach called me on a Friday morning with an update. We found Diana Whitmore, she said. She was in Costa Rica using a fake passport. Local authorities arrested her yesterday. She's being extradited back to the States to face charges. The money's been recovered. Most of it, anyway. She'd spent about $12,000, but the rest was frozen in the offshore account. I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for weeks. What about the Dawson client? Did they get their money back? Kovach confirmed they had. The FBI had worked with Meridian to restore the full amount, plus interest. Ms. Whitmore is looking at significant prison time, Kovach continued. Wire fraud alone carries up to 20 years. Add in the identity theft, conspiracy, and the fact that she fled the country and she's not getting out anytime soon. Julian Cross is testifying against her as part of his plea deal. The case is solid. I thanked her and ended the call. It was over. Actually over. Diana's trial happened 6 months later. Catherine thought I should attend, if only for closure. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched Diana Whitmore, the woman who'd brought me coffee and asked about my weekend, sit stone-faced as the prosecution laid out exactly how she'd planned to destroy my life to cover her theft. Julian Cross testified for 90 minutes, explaining in technical detail how he'd manipulated Meridian's systems to create the perfect frame job. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison. I didn't feel triumphant watching her be led away in handcuffs. I just felt tired. David Singh, my former supervisor, caught up with me outside the courthouse. He'd left Meridian 2 months after the scandal, taking a position at a competitor firm. I'm sorry, he said. I should have fought harder for you when HR made their accusations. I knew you wouldn't steal from a client. I shrugged. You were protecting yourself. I get it. He handed me a business card. If you're ever looking for a change, call me. My new company is hiring. We could use someone with your integrity. I pocketed the card and walked to my car. The thing about betrayal is that it changes how you see people. I went back to Meridian, collected my raise, and did my job. But I never brought anyone coffee anymore. Never volunteered to cover shifts. Never assumed that friendly coworkers were actually friends. Some people thought I'd become cold. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd just learned that the person asking you for a favor might be the same person plotting to destroy you. 3 months after Diana's sentencing, I got a call from Michael Torres, Catherine's investigator. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Diana's ex-husband was arrested yesterday. Turns out he'd been hiding assets the whole time he claimed he couldn't pay child support. He had $200,000 in an account under his girlfriend's name. Child services caught him. Diana's kids are with her sister now, and the sister is going after that money to actually take care of them. There was a certain poetry in that. Diana had destroyed my life trying to cover debts her ex-husband had the money to pay all along. If she'd just been honest, hired a better lawyer, pushed harder on the child support case, none of this would have happened. But she'd chosen the illegal route. She'd chosen to frame an innocent person. And now, she was paying for it. I left Meridian a year later, taking David up on his offer. The new company was smaller, the culture better, the people less likely to throw each other under the bus. Or maybe I was just more careful about who I trusted. I still get anxiety sometimes when my phone rings early in the morning. Still feel my stomach drop when I see an email from HR. Post-traumatic stress, my therapist calls it. The residual effect of having your life turned upside down by someone you thought was harmless. But I also learned something valuable. I learned that when the system works, it actually works. Agent Kovac didn't railroad me despite the evidence. Catherine fought for me when I had nothing but my word. Michael found the truth buried in financial records and IP addresses. The jury saw through Diana's lies. Justice, real justice, happened. It took time and money and more stress than anyone should have to endure, but it happened. And that matters. On the 1-year anniversary of that first HR meeting, I got a message from Alex, my buddy from Meridian's accounting department. "Hey man, saw Diana's appeal got denied. She's stuck with the full 15 years. Karma's real." I typed back a thumbs up and went back to my work. Karma wasn't real. Evidence was real. Investigation was real. People who did the hard work of finding truth were real. Diana didn't go to prison because of karma. She went to prison because she made mistakes, left a trail, and underestimated how hard I'd fight to clear my name. That's the story I tell myself anyway. The version where I'm not a victim, but a survivor. Where I didn't just get lucky, but got smart, hired the right people, and refused to accept being framed for someone else's crime. Maybe it's not entirely accurate. Maybe luck played a bigger role than I want to admit. But when you've been through something like that, you get to choose which version of the story you live with. I choose the one where I fought back and won. The thing about covering someone's shift is that you're doing them a favor. You're being a good coworker, a decent person, someone who helps when help is needed. Diana knew that about me. She counted on it. She built her entire plan around the fact that I'd say yes when she asked. And I did say yes. I'd do it again too, even knowing how it ended. Because the alternative is becoming someone who never helps anyone, who sees conspiracy in every request, who lives in constant suspicion. That's not who I am. I'm just more careful now, more aware. I verify things I used to take on trust. I document everything. I keep records. I don't delete texts or emails. I assume that anything I do could be scrutinized later, so I make sure I can defend it. It's exhausting sometimes living that way, but it's better than being naive. Robert Callahan retired from Meridian about 18 months after the whole mess. I heard through the grapevine that the company's board had been unhappy with how HR handled my case. There was talk of lawsuits, of liability, of damage to the company's reputation. Robert took the fall for that, even though Janet Brennan had been equally complicit. That's corporate politics for you. The person at the top of the org chart takes the blame, collects their retirement package, and moves on. I didn't feel particularly sorry for him. He'd had the power to investigate more thoroughly, to question the evidence, to at least consider that I might be telling the truth. He chose not to. Meridian implemented new security protocols after the scandal. 2-factor authentication for all financial transactions. Mandatory IT audits every month. Restrictions on shift coverage that required supervisor approval in writing. They closed the barn door after the horse was gone, as my dad would say. But at least future employees wouldn't be as easy to frame as I'd been. The Dawson client, the one whose $83,000 Diana had stolen, never knew I existed. Meridian handled the whole thing quietly, refunded the money immediately, and probably gave them some kind of account credit to keep them from switching to a competitor. That's how these things work at that level. The client stays happy, the company eats the cost, and the employees involved become case studies in compliance training videos. I ran into Julian Cross once, about 2 years after everything went down. He was working at an electronics store, wearing a blue polo shirt with a name tag, helping some elderly couple pick out a laptop. We made eye contact across the store. He looked away quickly, his face flushing red. I thought about confronting him, asking him if the $20,000 was worth it, if he ever felt guilty about nearly destroying an innocent person's life. But what would be the point? He'd made his choice. He'd cooperated with the FBI, testified against Diana, and gotten 18 months in minimum security prison instead of the 10 years he could have faced. He'd served his time, and now he was rebuilding his life the hard way, working retail and probably barred from any tech job that required a background check. His punishment was having to live with what he'd done. Mine was having to live with what was done to me. We weren't the same, but we were both stuck with the consequences of Diana's choices. I left the store without saying anything. Some confrontations aren't worth having. Some closure doesn't exist. You just move forward and try to build something better than what was destroyed. Catherine Reeves and I stayed in touch. She sends me a Christmas card every year with a photo of her golden retriever and a handwritten note about her latest big case. I sent her a bottle of expensive scotch when she won a precedent-setting case about digital evidence admissibility. She sent me a text that just said, "You have good taste." We're not friends exactly, but we're connected by that shared experience of fighting through something impossible and coming out the other side. That counts for something. Michael Torres reached out about a year ago asking if I'd be willing to be interviewed for a podcast he was starting about financial fraud cases. I politely declined. I don't want to be the guy whose defining story is about being framed by a coworker. I want to be the guy who does his job well, helps his team, and goes home to a life that doesn't revolve around trauma. Maybe that's running from it, or maybe that's healthy boundaries. My therapist says both things can be true. I'm still figuring out which version I believe. The last time I thought about Diana Whitmore was about 3 months ago. I was training a new employee, a young woman fresh out of college who reminded me a little of how I'd been when I started at Meridian. Eager, trusting, ready to help whenever someone asked. She mentioned that a coworker had asked her to cover a shift the following week. "Is that okay?" she asked me. "I mean, is that normal?" I thought about telling her the whole story. Thought about warning her that people aren't always what they seem, that favors can be traps, that trust is something you should give carefully. Instead, I said, "Make sure you get supervisor approval in writing before you log into someone else's workstation. Document everything. Keep records. If something seems off, even slightly, flag it immediately. Don't assume people have good intentions just because they seem nice." She looked a little confused, but nodded. "Okay, sure. Thanks for the advice." I don't know if she understood why I was telling her that. I don't know if she'll remember it when it matters. But I tried. That's all I can do. Share what I learned in a way that might help someone else avoid the same trap. If that makes me paranoid or jaded, so be it. I'd rather be paranoid than destroyed. Sometimes I wonder what Diana thinks about, sitting in federal prison with 13 years left on her sentence. Does she regret framing me? Does she wish she'd just been honest about her financial problems, asked for help, tried to work something out legally? Or does she still think she did nothing wrong, that she was justified because her ex-husband was a deadbeat and her kids needed support? I'll never know. She's never tried to contact me, never sent an apology, never acknowledged what she did beyond the bare minimum required by her guilty plea. Maybe that's for the best. I don't think I could forgive her even if she asked. What she did wasn't just theft. It was calculated destruction of another person's life as a smokescreen for her crime. That kind of malice doesn't deserve forgiveness. It deserves exactly what it got. 15 years in federal prison and a felony record that will follow her for the rest of her life. Her kids are almost adults now. They'll be in their 30s when she gets out. She missed their entire adolescence. Missed graduations and first jobs and relationships and all the small moments that make up a life. That's the real price she's paying. Not the prison time. The life she threw away. I'm 38 now. Dating someone who works in graphic design and has never heard of Meridian Financial Services. We met at a coffee shop, bonded over a shared hatred of pretentious espresso drinks, and took it slow because I'm still not great at trusting people quickly. She knows something bad happened at my old job, but I haven't told her the details. Maybe I will eventually. Maybe it'll always be this thing I don't talk about, this scar that's healed over but still aches sometimes. She asked me once why I'm so careful about everything, why I save every email and text message, why I document conversations in writing even when they seem casual. I told her I'd learned the hard way that proof matters more than truth. She said that was the saddest thing she'd ever heard. I said it was the most practical. We're both right. The coffee shop question led to dinner, which led to a second date, which led to 6 months of actually being happy in a way I hadn't been since before all of this started. She makes me laugh. She calls me out when I'm being paranoid. She reminds me that most people are basically good and that what happened to me was an exception, not the rule. I'm trying to believe her. Last month I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't recognize. The profile photo showed a woman in her early 20s with Diana's eyes. The message was short. "My name is Natalie. Diana Whitmore is my mother. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what she did to you. I read about the case. What she did was wrong. I hope you're doing okay." I stared at that message for a long time before responding. This girl had nothing to do with her mother's choices. She was a kid when it happened, caught in the blast radius of someone else's criminal decisions. But she'd tracked me down and apologized anyway, taking responsibility for something that wasn't her fault. That took guts. I wrote back, "Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the apology. I hope you're doing well and that you're not defined by your mother's mistakes. You're your own person. Best of luck." She never responded, but she didn't need to. That message gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Not closure exactly, but perspective. Proof that even people who do terrible things can raise kids who understand right from wrong, that the cycle doesn't have to continue, that one person's bad choices don't have to poison everyone around them forever. I still work in financial services, still help clients manage their money, still believe that most people are honest and that the system, for all its flaws, generally works. I'm just less naive about it now. Less willing to assume that surface-level friendliness means actual goodness. Less quick to say yes without asking questions. That's not bitterness. It's wisdom. The expensive, painful kind that you can't learn from books or lectures. You have to live through it. You have to sit in that HR office being accused of a crime you didn't commit. You have to watch your savings drain away paying lawyers. You have to feel the sick weight of knowing someone planned your destruction while smiling at you over coffee. And then you have to decide what kind of person you'll be on the other side of that. I decided to be someone who's careful, but not cruel. Cautious, but not closed off. Someone who still helps people but protects himself while doing it. Someone who learned that the world has predators in it, but refuses to become one himself. That's the best revenge against Diana Whitmore. Not her prison sentence or her destroyed reputation, but the fact that her worst efforts didn't turn me into someone like her. If you've made it this far, I guess you want to know if there's a lesson in all this. Some kind of moral or takeaway that makes sense of the madness. I've thought about it a lot, and here's what I've got. Document everything. Trust carefully. Verify before you act. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Diana showed me exactly who she was the moment she asked me to cover that shift. I just didn't know what I was looking at. I thought I was seeing a coworker in crisis. I was actually seeing a criminal setting up her alibi. The difference between those two things is everything. It's the difference between compassion and complicity, between helping someone and being used by them. I don't regret helping her. I regret not questioning why she needed help. That's the lesson that actually matters. Not that people are evil or that kindness is dangerous. But that verification isn't the opposite of trust. It's the foundation of it. Real help, real friendship, real anything worthwhile can survive questions and documentation. Anything that falls apart when you ask for proof was probably a trap to begin with. I'm still learning that lesson, still practicing it every day, still trying to find the balance between openness and protection. It's hard work, but it's better than the alternative. Better than ending up back in that HR office being accused of crimes I didn't commit. Better than watching my life burn down because I was too trusting or too naive or too eager to be seen as helpful. That version of me is gone. I'm not sure I miss him. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.